There are few questions in life that matter as much as we pretend they do, and then there is this one. Which Mr. Darcy is actually the best Mr. Darcy? Jane Austen unleashed him on the reading public in 1813, proud, disagreeable, and in possession of a fortune large enough to make everyone try very hard to forgive the first two things. Since then, he has been played by approximately every British actor of a certain jaw, and several who had no business being there at all. This is my attempt to rank them. It is entirely subjective. It is occasionally unfair. I have strong opinions and no formal qualifications, which, if you think about it, puts me in excellent company with most of literary criticism. Our scale today runs from Tolerable, which, if you recall, is precisely how Mr. Darcy described Elizabeth Bennet at their first meeting, all the way to handsome enough to tempt us. He did eventually revise his opinion. We will be equally generous. Or not, as the case may be. If you disagree, and statistically someone will, the comments are right there. Bias is welcome. Civility is appreciated. We begin. We open appropriately at the bottom. Pride and Prejudice is a Bollywood-influenced reimagining of Pride and Prejudice set partly in India, partly in Los Angeles, and entirely in a world where casting directors apparently ran out of options. Martin Henderson, a New Zealander, was cast as Will Darcy, an American hotel magnate. The character retains Darcy's arrogance but loses everything else, including, crucially, the sense that there is anything beneath the arrogance worth finding. Henderson is not without charm. He is handsome in an uncomplicated way, which is precisely the problem. Darcy's appeal has never been straightforwardly handsome. It has always been the tension, the man who is clearly feeling more than he is willing to show. Henderson shows very little and appears to be feeling approximately the same amount. The film around him is genuinely fun. The music is good. The colors are wonderful. Will Darcy is present in several scenes. Verdict: tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt us. David Rintoul made a deliberate choice. He played Darcy as cold, controlled, and almost entirely without visible interior life. Whether by design or accident, that is almost exactly how Elizabeth would have experienced him at first. Proud, remote, and largely unreadable. You cannot know what you cannot see. The performance is faithful to the novel's structure in a way that is admirable in theory and occasionally exhausting in practice. 5 episodes is still a long time to spend with a man who appears to have the emotional range of an oil portrait. And yet there are moments, something shifts behind Rintoul's eyes, and you understand exactly why Elizabeth is confused and why she should perhaps pay closer attention. He is not the Darcy anyone falls in love with. He is the Darcy Austen actually wrote in the first half of the novel before he puts pen to paper and explains himself. For that, he deserves more credit than he usually receives. Verdict: not disagreeable, strictly on his own terms. Laurence Olivier did not entirely trust Austen's Darcy. This is evident within approximately 4 minutes of the 1940 Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer production, in which Darcy arrives at the Meryton ball looking like a man who has already decided to enjoy himself. He is arch, he is charming, he is, at several points, rather twinkly. This is not a criticism, it is simply a different interpretation, one shaped by Hollywood's conviction that American audiences would not sit through 2 hours of a man being unwillingly attractive. They softened him. They also changed the ending significantly, gave Lady Catherine a redemption arc she absolutely does not deserve in the novel, and dressed everyone in costumes from roughly 40 years after the story is set. Accuracy was not the priority. What they got right is Olivier himself, who is magnetic in the way that only people who know they are magnetic can be. He makes Darcy's transformation feel inevitable because he never quite convinces you it was necessary. You suspect this Darcy was always going to be fine. Verdict: rather handsome, though not the one Austen wrote. Here is something that should not work and does. Sam Riley, in a leather coat, fighting the undead, as Mr. Darcy. The 2016 adaptation is exactly what it sounds like. Pride and Prejudice, but everyone knows martial arts and the English countryside is overrun with zombies. It is absurd. It commits to the absurdity completely, which is the only sensible approach, and Riley commits with it. His Darcy is laconic, physically capable, and possessed of a very good coat. He delivers Darcy's lines with the quiet gravity of a man who has genuinely considered them, which is more than some Darcys in considerably more serious productions have managed. There is also a scene in which he and Elizabeth fight each other in a drawing room while negotiating the terms of their relationship, which is honestly not the worst way to understand Pride and Prejudice. Verdict: surprisingly handsome. against all reasonable expectations. Lost in Austen is a television series in which a modern woman named Amanda Price steps through a portal in her bathroom and ends up inside Pride and Prejudice, while Elizabeth Bennet disappears into 21st century London. It is structurally chaos. It is also one of the more interesting things that has ever been done with this novel. Elliot Cowan's Darcy is the most literary Darcy on this list, in the sense that the show forces him to be interrogated as a construction. Amanda knows the plot. She knows what he is supposed to feel and when and for whom. He does not. And watching him navigate a woman who behaves like no one he has ever encountered, because she is from the future and knows his entire character arc, produces something genuinely surprising. He gets to be confused and still be compelling. Cowan is also, for the record, very tall. This is not irrelevant. Austen describes Darcy as tall. Most adaptations interpret this loosely. Verdict: quite handsome, and perhaps the most underrated Darcy on this list. Matthew Macfadyen's Darcy is soft. There is no other word for it. Where Firth is controlled and Rintoul is remote, Macfadyen plays Darcy as a man who is overwhelmed by his own feelings, by Elizabeth, by the basic difficulty of existing in proximity to someone you are desperately trying not to love. "You have bewitched me, body and soul." He says this at dawn, looking like a man who has not slept because technically he has not. It is, objectively, a great deal. And yet it works, because Macfadyen spends the entire film quietly losing an argument with his own face. This is, quietly, the most human interpretation of the character. And for a film that only has 2 hours to work with, it is a remarkable achievement. The hand flex as he helps Elizabeth into the carriage. You know the one. Verdict: very nearly tempting, and responsible for approximately 30% of current romantic expectations. Colin Firth did not want this role. The BBC had doubts about him too. A studio executive suggested he was not handsome enough. The screenwriter Andrew Davies had concerns about his hair. Firth himself had not read a word of Austen and described her work as, in his own words, rather sissy. He took the role anyway. The rest is the kind of cultural history that is difficult to explain to anyone who did not live through it. The 1995 adaptation aired over 6 weeks in the autumn, and by the time it finished, something had shifted. Firth's Darcy, controlled, watchful, feeling everything and showing almost none of it, became the template against which every subsequent interpretation has been measured. The wet shirt scene, now so famous it has its own mythology, was not in the original script. Andrew Davies invented it because he needed a reason for Darcy to be compromised, to be caught at a disadvantage, to be human. It was a practical solution to a narrative problem. It became an icon. What Firth does, across 6 hours of television, is build a performance of extraordinary patience. He does not ask you to like Darcy. He does not explain him. He simply allows you to watch a man slowly realize that everything he thought he knew about himself was wrong, and that this is neither comfortable nor avoidable. And then, 6 years later, he did it again. Mark Darcy in Bridget Jones's Diary is, canonically, named after and modeled on Darcy, and Firth plays him with full awareness of the joke and no contempt for it whatsoever. I like you very much, just as you are, delivered with complete sincerity. 2 Darcys, 1 actor, no notes. Verdict: handsome enough to tempt us, against considerable odds, and despite everyone's initial reservations, including his own. I was, in fact, ready to end this video. The ranking was complete. But 2 days ago, I found another BBC adaptation on YouTube, 1967. Nobody had told me it existed. So, one more. Louis Fiander is not officially in the ranking, but historically, he matters. He is the earliest surviving BBC television Darcy, and he may be Darcy at his most unexpectedly charming. At first, he looks like a snob, which is fair. That is part of the job. But underneath it, there is a private sense of fun, a little secret amusement that keeps slipping through the manners. It is a very charismatic performance. And since we are already here, a brief acknowledgement of the others who wore the cravat without making this list. Peter Cushing played Darcy in the BBC's 1952 adaptation. It was performed live, and the footage does not survive. On the evidence of his other work, he was probably quite good. We will never know. The same, in a slightly different early television tragedy, goes for Alan Battle in the 1958 version. That one was recorded, repeated, exported, and then apparently discarded, which is a very early television way of treating cultural history. We note his existence and move on. I debated whether to include the next entry. I concluded that not including it would be a greater editorial failure than including it. Wishbone, a Jack Russell Terrier, played Darcy in a 1995 episode of the children's television series Wishbone. He is small, self-assured, and utterly convinced of his own superiority. He is also, if we are being precise, the only Darcy on this list who requires no character development whatsoever, because he arrived fully formed. We respect the commitment. Orlando Seal appeared in a 2003 American adaptation set among the Mormon community in Utah, in which Darcy becomes a wealthy businessman. This exists. You may watch it if you wish. Daniel Vincent Gord played William Darcy in the Lizzie Bennet Diaries, a 2012 YouTube series told through video blogs. It was genuinely inventive and won an Emmy. He is fine. Matthew Rhys, who is an excellent actor, and I hope you all watched him recently in Widow's Bay, appeared in Death Comes to Pemberley, a 2013 murder mystery sequel to Pride and Prejudice. But this is less a Darcy interpretation than a detective story with Darcy trapped inside it, so I left him out of the main ranking. And allow me to briefly mention one more Darcy from The Other Bennet Sister, a recent series told from Mary Bennet's point of view. He does not appear often. The series itself is genuinely lovely though, and I do recommend it. And then there is the Darcy we cannot judge yet. Netflix has a new adaptation of Pride and Prejudice on the way, which we are supposed to see before the end of 2026. Jack Lowden will play Mr. Darcy, Emma Corrin will play Elizabeth Bennet, Olivia Colman will play Mrs. Bennet, and the screenplay is by Dolly Alderton. We know very little else. We are, against our better judgment, hopeful. So, I hope I did not forget anyone. The comments, as mentioned, are open. Tell me where I am wrong, tell me your Darcy. Thank you for watching, and see you.